a lot of people are stuck in D&D, and if you watch my channel at all, it's really D&D focused. And for me, I loved Palladium Heroes and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Riffs. And so we got, like, for me, it was all these like kind of oddball games that I just like. I liked them better than D&D. Other people DM'd, but when it came to those oddball games, I was like, I'm GMing. I'm doing, because I found that those spoke to me more than the typical fantasy genre.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk, the podcast where I delve into the minds of tabletop gaming creatives. Join me as I uncover their creative process and inspirations. You are in the right place if you enjoy listening to thoughtful interviews with creative people.
This is Chris Spivey. When I'm not looking for another ball of scotch, you'll find me listening to Tabletop Talk.
Howdy friends, Craig here. My guest today is Garry Snow. He's the host of the Dieku podcast and YouTube channel, director of the documentary Friendly Local Game Store, as well as the writer and designer of Bugbusters, a rules-light TTRPG where you play working-class exterminators protecting the planet from a secret alien insect invasion. Garry, that's a hell of a sentence. Welcome to the third floor.
Well, thanks for having me on. And your intros are much better than mine. When I have a guest on the show, I always say it's like the first pancake, but I usually end up with 3 or 4 pancakes and they're all stuck and I'm trying to get them off the griddle. And so you did great.
So for what he's referring to is something you will not hear unless you go to the very end of the podcast, which is it took me about 4 tries to get through his intro because I kept flubbing it. And you know what's funny about that, Garry, is that noise I make when I flub, I now know what it looks like when I'm editing. So I can tell when a flub is coming because I know it sounds like or looks like on my audio edit.
Well, it's a difficult. I start getting ahead of myself and I start reading and, you know, the mind and the mouth don't match up.
No, and it very often doesn't. So Garry, as someone who is obviously listened to the show before, you know what's coming, which is I need to get your origin story. So there was at one point you knew nothing about alien invading Bugbusters, let alone TTRPGs in general. And I kind of want to go back in time. So can you take me back to when this was first put in front of you as a hobby?
Sure. Well, I guess if you want to go right back to the roots of it, and maybe I'll mention to your viewers or listeners that I grew up in Canada, and I grew up just above the Idaho Panhandle. And so we got all the U.S. TV, we got all the U.S. media.
Gotcha.
Like for all, you know, Canadians are Americans. We grew up on U.S. media.
Media, yeah.
And so I grew up in a small town, 20,000 in the Rocky Mountains above the Idaho Panhandle. And for me, I was probably very typical of my age. I loved Star Wars. I loved Star Trek. I just, you know, all those things. I had all the toys and everything. I played Atari 2600. And I was kind of in the geeky zone to begin with. Yeah. And then my sister, my older sister, I have 2 older sisters, but my oldest one, she was a big Tolkien fan. And, you know, she had the Hildebrandt calendars and
nice.
She had a whole bunch of sci-fi books kicking around. And so the pumps were primed. I was kind of I was ready to embrace tabletop role-playing games. And then, as, you know, sometimes happens, a kid got a book from his older brother, brought it into school and showed everybody. And we all sat around and, oh, this is cool. And we stayed in. Instead of going outside to play, we stayed in and
nice.
Rolled up some characters and made characters. And we really, really didn't know what we were doing. That's for sure.
We never did. No.
You know, but it was kind of like, it was novel and it was kind of interesting. And that was at the time that D&D kind of had hit its craze. And so I remember going into a drugstore with my mom and there's a red box there because TSR had started to like infiltrate non-traditional places, and there was a drugstore, and I said, I need that. So I convinced her to buy it, and then I was just kind of off to the races. And
wow.
I have to say, my childhood growing up, it was pretty idyllic, I would say, for what you would see on Stranger Things or like E.T., small town. I grew up on
kids
the edge
on
of
bikes.
towns. Kids on bikes. We left on our bikes in the morning, and then we didn't come home until night. And built tree forts and explored. Yep. And then when as we got older, D&D started to take more of a prominence in our life. And I have to say, before we started getting summer jobs, it was like sleep in, drive to my friends on my bike in the afternoon, play all afternoon, go home for dinner, play all night, sometimes late into the night, and then repeat. And that was kind of summers for us. And I look back upon that time, and it was like really, I think what a lot of people aspire to, like old people of my age at least, aspire to get back to that kind of feeling D&D provided.
Yeah, there's that that nostalgia lens, right? And it never was exactly as we remember it, but that's okay. That's the way our brains are wired, and that's good. And it used for the power of good, that nostalgia I think is wonderful. Sometimes you see it twisted, and like people our age start becoming grumpy old men and assholes. Luckily, not all of us do, but sometimes
not us though.
That's right. We're the good guys.
Yeah.
But I miss it. And for me, it wasn't D&D. We played D&D a little bit. For me, it was Marvel Superheroes, man. That TSR, FASRIP. There's 2 whole summers gone, and like reams of typing paper I stole out of my father's office so we could draw up more characters and roll up more characters and make more superheroes.
Well, see, it's interesting because like a lot of people are stuck in D&D, and if you watch my channel at all, it's really un-D&D focused. And for me, I loved Palladium Heroes and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Riffs. And so we got for me, it was all these kind of oddball games that I just I liked them better than D&D. Other people DM'd, but when it came to those oddball games, I was like, I'm GMing. I'm doing
nice.
Because I found that those spoke to me more than the typical fantasy genre.
So when we look at your Stranger Thing pack of kids that you spent those summers with, are you in touch with any of them anymore?
No, it's funny. I thought you might even ask this question, and I was kind of reflecting upon it. That no, I'm not. I guess I am. Facebook, everybody kind of keeps tabs. But in high school, we stayed close until high school, and I remember it was a core group, and then people graduated, and some went off to university. I had couple friends join the military, and I had people move away and that kind of thing, and it just kind of petered out a little bit. We got careers and lives. Well, I didn't get a career. That's a whole next chapter. I was kind of like maybe what you would call a failure to launch, so to speak.
Interesting. Yeah,
I got a job at a video store. And I was happy with that. I worked the late shift. I watched movies until 4 or 5 a.m. I would it's funny. I was actually building my own role-playing game at that time because I never lost the love of it, even though we weren't playing it anymore. This goes back to my origin story. I've always just wanted to make role-playing games. Right from as soon as I discovered it. Why is that
though? What's that drive?
I find it I've said this before on my channel. It's truly an art form. When you think about people that write fiction or they draw or illustrate, or it's a way to express yourself and to create an environment for other people to enjoy, and the world building aspect of it. I just find the art form of role playing games just fascinating.
So Gary, if we were to make an experiment and we take that group of kids that you spent those summers with, they've just slowly peeled away, and so but somehow you stuck, right? You could not let this hobby go, and it's been a part of your life starting then through till now. Do you have a sense of what was different about you? So looking back at that pack of kids now, does that surprise you that you were the one that kept the torch burning, or could that question even make sense?
I think a lot of them still are passionate, even if they don't play. I think if you dropped a book in front of them, they'd be happy to play. It's just their circumstances might have changed. They moved to a different town that they didn't have access to it or anything like that. And I've periodically bumped them on Facebook going, hey, we should get the gang together and do an online session. And but people are busy. But for me, it was just it just felt Like it would always be a part of my life. But much like you, because I've watched your channel, like I had a big gap after that time. And, it's probably a whole other story of like I dropped out in the 90s, which actually probably leads into my Bugbusters kind of characters and that kind of stuff. But I dropped out in the 90s. I had a 69 Volkswagen van, and I went and did a job called tree planting. And so most Americans.
So I know what those words means, but I don't know what that job is.
It's the most bizarre probably experience that you can imagine is like, we in Canada, we live in a really remote area. You can drive for hours sometimes and not see any kind of houses or any kind of like people living there. And tree planting, they used to do forestry, and they would clear cut, which is not maybe a good practice, but they would clear cut. And in the summertime, they would hire university students or other people to come up and plant trees, little 6-inch seedlings, and you would have a couple bags strapped to you. And because it's such steep ground, you're basically hiking all day with these bags of trees, and you make a hole with your shovel and you put them in with your hand. And you do that for 10 hours a day in
Holy shit.
Rain, hot heat, whatever the case might be. And you live in a camp. And I slept in my van, but most people just stay in their tent. And you get your day off, but they pay you by the tree.
Isn't that something?
And so you might make 25 cents a tree. So the faster you go, the more money you make. But it totally teaches you a work ethic. And like I said, I had this like failure to launch kind of person. I was like not too motivated. I did 1 year of college, but I dropped out because the whole time I kept all of my projects were like D&D focused in that business admin program. I was like, if it's marketing, okay, how do I market D&D? Like that's how like in tune I was. But this tree planting job, I really dropped out for like 7 years, and you do it in the summertime.
Wow.
So maybe 8 years. And you do it in the summertime. And then in the winter, I would snowboard. I was like a snowboard bum. And that was kind of my life for 7-8 years until I met my future wife. And I said, holy shit, I got to get
your shit together.
Can I say shit on here?
Yeah. Oh, I can understand that. It that's incredible though. And what's neat about that is, those are experiences that are a part of who you are now. And it's impossible to say this failure to launch would have changed had you launched earlier. But boy, you've got some experiences under your belt now that have got to be a part of who you are.
The people that I tree planted with, if you can imagine, they were like weird people. Like there was like ravers, there was back to the landers, there was immigrants from Eritrea, and Mali. Like, I mean, it was just a weird conglomeration of people. And a lot of people, like stoners, really liked it because they could smoke between trips with their bags full of trees. And it was just like a real place to kind of drop out of society. But the people that I met were the most entertaining, the most exotic, and they actually, like I said, all these different groups of people inspired Bugbuster characters.
Oh, that's so cool. So that kind of gives us an idea of your gaming origin story, but we've got a second origin story that I want to get to, which is where does, film and the desire to be part of that industry, where does that start? I would assume the video store.
The video store. I think I watched a ton of film, absorbed it. I guess it was a close second if I wanted to be a game designer or a filmmaker. But living in a small town, you just kind of put those dreams out of your mind. You're like, well, that just seems like something somebody else does.
Right.
And when I said, boy, I got to get my shit together to get married. I went back to that same community college that I went 1 year, and I went onto the bulletin board and I looked, and there was like different programs, and one of them was, at the time, was called New Media Communications, and I saw there was one course in it that I recognized. It was graphic design, and I said, graphic design, that might be my ticket into role-playing games.
Right.
And then there's all these other courses of like internet design, like web design and all. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I had never been on the internet before.
Amazing.
So I said, but graphic design, maybe I can make a game. So I took the course the whole program based upon that one single course. And it kind of changed the direction of my life. And, my work ethic had improved. All of a sudden I was taking like courses that I really enjoyed, and I was getting like A's, and I was like, oh, I like this. And so for the first time, like I was just like, this is what I was meant to do. And it was a really good program. It had like graphic design, animation, web design, a little bit of filmmaking. And like that just pushed me into this whole sphere of being able to create with almost any kind of medium. Yeah. And like audio recording, it's all helped out. Like even with my podcast, I kind of knew how to be able to do some of this stuff. And so it was like really good. And it just kind of took off. But as, and I thought, oh, this is the time. It was around the OGL time, actually, that I graduated. And I thought, this is the time that I'm finally going to make my game, like the OGL stuff. But as fate has it, I had 2 kids, and my spare time started to go away. And I went, okay, I guess I'm going to have to put this on the back burner. But I know you've had Steve Jackson on your show. And I remember there was a posting for Steve Jackson. They were hiring a game designer. And I was trying to convince my wife that I needed to apply to this and we needed to move to Austin. And she said, no.
You could make tens of dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you're enrolled in the community college, it's a different experience for you now because you give a shit and you actually enjoy it, right? And unlike, it sounds like the first year, it just never got its hooks into you. And you take that first course and you're attracted to it because of the connection again to being a game designer and wanting to make a game. Do you have a sense of when it stopped being that and started holding its own? Like when it stopped being, I'm going to use this because I want to make games, to, I think I just like this and I enjoy that. Do you have a sense of when that may have happened?
Well, there's maybe one like little connector piece is, so I was still in this small town and I had this skill set, but there was only kind of 2 jobs in this town that met my skill sets, and I had already had both of them. And,
we got to tell us what they are.
Well, it was just like communications manager and marketing manager. Actually, for that community college, it ended up. I actually ended up teaching in that program after I graduated.
Isn't that something?
And then we had a little bit of tragedy befall the family, and actually, my wife did pass away to cancer. And I found myself, once again, like with limited time. My daughters were 5 and 6 at the time.
Oh my God! Garry.
And we've obviously managed through it, but after, another 3 or 4 years after that, I said, boy, like I got to change things up again.
Yeah.
So at that point I said, I put my resume out everywhere, and I ended up in Calgary, Alberta.
No kidding.
Canada. And that's near the Rocky Mountains and the prairie side of it. It's kind of like Denver of Canada. And then, so I was like doing a corporate job there. I met my now wife. So, all things are good.
And again, you had to get your shit together.
I had to get my shit together. And so, I kept doing the film work this whole time. I was doing like corporate vignettes, doing corporate communications. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking I'd love to do game stuff at some point. But sadly, I will say I had a bin full of all my books. And when I moved to Calgary, I ended up selling it, which later on, boy, do I regret that.
Yeah.
Oh. And I've done my best to rebuild the collection, but I should have never sold. Don't sell your stuff. Don't ever.
So it's really funny you just said that, because over the weekend I was cleaning out. There's very few people have seen the 3rd floor. It's a goddamn disaster. I am a compulsive collector. I've got board games and role-playing games everywhere. In 2 weeks, the locals come back to play. I've got to get this place in order, right? So it's like, all right, it's time to like get reorganized, put stuff back into the attic that needs to stay in the attic, and like another human being needs to be able to come up here and not go, oh my God, Craig is mentally ill. And so I was packing, and I was at that purge phase, right? Where I'm like, there's just stuff that I keep putting back into a box and it never comes out. Right. So I've got a stack of White Dwarf, literally a huge, 5-gallon thing of White Dwarf magazines, which is the old Games Workshop magazine for, painting. Right. Sitting there staring at it, and there's gotta be, I don't know, 100 issues in there. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, well, I guess I could sell it, but nobody really buys them. And I took that damn thing to the garbage bin and I dumped it. And the whole time I'm thinking, and this is the mental illness piece, right? The sickness in me is going, there's a 10 year from now, Craig going, what the hell did you just do? What are you doing? But at some point, I have to, you got to purge it. So, oh God.
Yeah, well, I had been dragging these around, that bin. 3 or 4 bins. I had been dragging them around from move to move and kept them going, well, maybe one day. And I thought, okay, I'm moving. I don't want to drag them with me, 4 hours travel and trip. So then I just said, okay, that's it for me. But then as luck would have it, and I was kind of still new to the town of Calgary, and I went for a walk. And I was walking by this building, and I looked, and there's a dragon on the side of the building, and I thought, that's odd.
Hello.
that's interesting to me. And so I made my way up the stairs and into the doorway, and then I opened the door, and it was like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory in there. You walk in, and you overlook. There's a big walkway around it where the people play games on. And it's big, and it's like a giant warehouse just full of anything that a geek could love. Board games, sci-fi, fantasy books, D&D, tabletop role-playing games, miniatures. And I was just absolutely blown away. And I just took a picture and sent it to all of my D&D friends on Facebook and said, holy shit, I just found Nirvana
Mecca.
Here. Yeah, Mecca. Yeah, Mecca is the perfect... and so I couldn't believe that this was in Calgary. I didn't know about it for whatever reason. I just never knew about it. And that it really excited me. And then, it stayed with me, and I'd go in there periodically and check things out. And I was just always kind of blown away by it. But then when the documentary came to be, I don't know if you want me to get into that.
Yeah, please keep going. Yeah.
So I was working for this soul-sucking corporate job, and every now and again I'd go online, and I remember finding there was at that time OSR was just kind of taking off, and I'd go and check it out, but I couldn't find people to play with it locally. But then I was doing this soul-sucking corporate job, and COVID hit, and they didn't lay me off, but they used and abused me. Because they said, well, we need to up our communication. So it was just work. And then they finally said, okay, thanks for doing all that. Now we're going to let you go. And,
super nice of them. Okay.
Corporations.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden I found myself without a job. And I went, well, what have I always wanted to do? Was to make films and make games. And so I thought, well, here's my opportunity. So I went to the store, and it was during COVID, so there's still really in Canada especially, there's a lot of lockdowns and limitations on what you could and go places and that sort of thing. But I talked to the owner, and I said, hey, I'd love to do a documentary on the Sentry Box. And I knew that they had just celebrated their 40th anniversary, because that's how long they had been there. And I think at first Gord Johansson is the owner. He said, well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, maybe. Because I think some people had maybe done little bits of video for him in the past. And so, but I dove into it the true documentary, and I got a whole bunch of people that I thought would be interesting. I kind of beat the bushes. I asked for archival photos and set up filming times. And I think... probably over about a 3-4 week window, I did all the interviews, I took all the B-roll, and then I went away. and started to edit it. And the editing probably took about 2 months or so by the time I got it done. And then I said, Gord, I think I have a draft of it. And I took it in there because I didn't want to just send him a link. I took it in there and played it on my laptop. And I think he was like kind of moved by it. He said, I had no idea that you were going to do this. So, I was pretty proud of it. And I think it really reflected, I get choked up about it,
Yeah.
Like the community that I got to share their story and how impactful the store was to the people. So,
yeah, and I've not seen it, but you've sent me some clips, and everybody, just so you know, you can scroll down. I've got links to the trailer and stuff. Few things real quick. One, you cannot overstate the visual, like, holy shit. Well, the first time I saw this store in these clips, I'm like this is I've seen a lot of impressive places, we've got Atomic Empire here in the Raleigh-Durham area, and it's an old Kmart that has been converted into a game store, and that's doesn't even come close to what I saw in that video. That place is amazing. But for that owner, because this isn't some high school kid coming in and shooting a bunch of videos and splicing it together or making a 2-minute thing. I mean, you poured passion into that. And I cannot imagine the emotional response that he must have had seeing this through a whole light, let alone like hearing people talk about it in the interviews. I mean, was there people that surprised him that you were able to get time with and that made it to film?
Yeah, I went through, even sometimes unbeknownst to him, I went through and found like early people that would go to the store.
Yeah.
That might not go there anymore. And, they would tell stories about how he really honestly started selling out of the back of his trunk at a convention or two. And then he went into like a little store, and then another little store. And then finally this property came up, which was just like this huge, massive warehouse. And everybody was like, how are you going to fill that space? It's just massive. And I think he was almost ahead of his time, where he set up the playing area, and that like really solidified the community. And then he had one of his employees started to make I think he made like things for his mom's fish tank, like little like decorative stuff that went in fish tanks. And he said, hey, could you do that for the walls? And so like this gentleman, he would like go in and like at night, and he would like work on the carving out like an Egyptian wall, and like call it Cthulhu. There's like a military base, like World War II kind of setting, like a village in Italy that was kind of bombed out. There's a Warhammer, everything's kind of got
incredible.
It's and it is absolutely incredible. And during the filming of it, I would like set up almost like a secret camera, and people would walk in just like me and get out their phone and go, holy smokes, I can't believe I found this place. And people still, in Canada at least, make pilgrimages to come from all over Canada to come to the Sentry Box. And in the documentary, like, people are calling saying, are you closed yet? We're we're 2 hours outside of town, don't close.
Oh, bless. So, like, having spent all that time with it, I mean, keeping any game store open for 40 years is a huge accomplishment. Let alone one that size. And it's not, Calgary's not like a small town. Calgary's like a big boy city, right? But it's not New York City, yeah. No. Right? It's not Chicago. It's not Quebec, right? Or Toronto. So through the process of learning so much, like, did you get a sense of what the difference was, what the secret was, like how he was able to keep that place open?
Well, he's a very shrewd business person.
How so?
He much like I see in the game design world, like, you have to have some business acumen. You can't just go in there with an ideal of, I'm going to make a game store. So he was really savvy with the business side of things. And then as well, I think he kind of hit the waves just right. Like, he hit D&D and the Euro games, and then 5e, Stranger Things. Everything just kind of seemed to hit and just propel him just that much more so that he could just keep going.
That's
and I know even during COVID, I said, like, have you slowed down? He said, oh, no, we've had so many curbside pickups, and, people were playing at home. So he I think he did okay during the COVID era, and he still continues to do every year. Like, and every time I go in there, it's like so busy. Like, and it's it's
cool.
And it's really people's third home, like that third place.
Yeah.
You hear that people talk about that. It's their third place. There's people that go in there every single day just to chit chat, even if it's for 5-10 minutes, just to say hey. But it's like a real important part. And I mean, also, Calgary in Canada is cold, and so I think we like it. Honestly, it was minus 40 Celsius here last week, which I don't. For those at home, that's also minus 40 Fahrenheit. So and plus wind chill.
Oh my goodness!
On top of that, so it can get cold here, and I think gaming inside in the winter seems like a pretty good option.
So something I've always wondered, you're actually the first person I've ever talked to that's actually made a documentary. So you, unfortunately, are going to get the question. So I love watching documentaries. And one of the things that has always fascinated me is a bit of a chicken and egg, which is all the greatest documentaries have a through line as you're watching it. There's a story being told. It's not just clip after clip after clip, right? There's a through line that takes you through the beginning, middle, and end. Just as if you're watching fiction, right? And what I've always wondered is, do you know that going in? Do you just have a ship ton of footage and you piece it together? Like, how did that work for you? So did you go in there saying, I think this is the story I want to tell, and then you filmed it? Or am I making sense?
Yeah. No, it's a little bit iterative. I remember, like, when I was younger and I would see a documentary like written by, and I always went, how the hell?
Right.
How the hell do you write a documentary? And you just don't. But when you frame the questions up to the participants, it helps to shape their answers. And you kind of have to know going into it the kind of answers that you suspect to get. But, much like, Craig, on your show, when you go down like a rabbit hole and you're like, this is where the interesting parts are. And you got to be able to throw your questions away and go, okay, let's investigate this a little bit further, because this is where the story is.
So if I were to pull the written by Garry before you started filming and compare that to watching it when it's completed, how much changed?
I mean, I had a pretty good sense of the story going into it, but I think what really surprised me, I mean, there's a couple things that kind of stood out to me, is that the level that people loved that story. Like, I cannot say that enough. They absolutely love that story. It's a piece of them.
You're right.
And then also, like, I'm 50 plus years old. Like, we talk about Stranger Things. We talk about, guys playing role-playing games. But it was nice to see the diversity also come through.
Oh, God
There's
bless.
like a whole new crop of young women that are playing, and not just women, but gender diverse everywhere.
Yeah.
And they have people working there that are like intelligent about the games, and like they're knowledgeable. And it was just it was good to see the hobby grow from like my era, which was mostly guys.
Yeah, it was a bunch of white dudes, right? For the longest time, the hobby was, and I'm with you. When I came back from my Rumpelstiltskin sleep nap, that's one of the first things I noticed. It's just like, God, look how much richer this is than when I left, let alone like some of the other geek hobbies I was into at the time when I came back to role-playing, because I was very much into miniature gaming. Miniature gaming still pretty damn bad and pretty damn white, right? And but to see the level of diversity in TTRPGs, I think it's a testament to the hobby. And I think that the heart of it. So you make this documentary. Does that get rid of the bug? Right? Does that sate that part of you creatively? Do you want to make more of these? What's next as far as this part of your creative journey in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, I took the opportunity. I started working on like 2 or 3 other documentaries almost simultaneously at the same
kidding.
time. Back in my hometown of 20,000, there's this old movie theater that one of my kind of not close friends, but like, I guess acquaintances bought the theater with the intention of turning it into a music venue. And I said, hey, that's going to be a good story, success or failure.
Right.
It's going to be an interesting story. So every now and again, when I go back home to visit, I'll set up the camera, or if he still plays. So if he plays in a show here in Calgary, I'll go record it. So that's kind of underway. And I've got a few other, and I shot a short film. It's kind of a 20-minute meet cute of a couple that were fighting over a pair of Converse in a thrift store, and that propelled them into kind of meeting with the symbol of the left and right shoe. So, I wrote, directed that, and shot that. I'm in the process of editing it. So, yeah, I guess I still hold on to that dream of like filmmaking, game design, and in some instances they can meet up, and the friendly local game store did.
So now let's talk about the podcast / YouTube channel a little bit. Now, does that come after the documentary? Or did it exist beforehand? Where does that fit into your timeline? The beginning of that? It
kind of came like halfway through the documentary. I was filming it, and one of the people I interviewed, there's a group, they have their own actual play that they do on a podcast, and I was interviewing them just as the group. But as we were talking, he actually did his master's thesis on role-playing games.
Interesting.
And I said, well, hey, would you mind sending me your master's thesis? And he did. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Can I interview just on your own? And so we got into like kind of more like the philosophy of like game design and what makes good games and the history of it. And I went, I want to do more of this kind of like discussion. And, I slowly started to like feel a little bit more confident of my interviewing skills and my knowledge back into the game world. And so I reached out to a couple people and said, hey, would you mind trying out me doing a podcast? And it was pretty bad, I would say. At first.
It was your first bad pancake.
Exactly. Well, there's probably 4 or 5 bad pancakes in there. So my apologies. It's not because of the guest. It's because of me. But, I worked through that. And there was a point where I thought, maybe this isn't anything that I should keep doing. I'm not that good at it. And maybe I should hang it up.
Why did you feel that way? What made you say to yourself, I'm not good at this?
Well, I just think I felt bad for the guests actually. I was like,
how so?
Well, like they're game designers. They're doing a really good job of making games. I reach out to them and go, hey, I love your game. Can I talk to you about it? And I don't feel like I was getting enough. I wasn't setting them up to be as successful. And also, even more so than that, like my viewership was so low. Like I felt bad that they might get like 80 views, and I was like, I'm making them do all this work. And I feel bad that I'm not bringing the audience to showcase their good work. And I almost hung it up, but I kept going. And but it also invigorated me when I would talk to these designers. I'd be like, oh, that's so cool. I want to learn more, and reached out to other people. And it just kind of kept growing. And then I didn't feel quite as bad because my audience started to also build. And so it was, rather than a favor for them, I was actually helping them.
Yeah, that's a neat corner to turn, isn't it? I'll never forget the first time I had somebody reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'd like to be on the show." I'm like, "Oh, geez, okay." Yeah. It's a neat feeling. So you look back, Garry, at you interviewing early, and you said you weren't good at it, right? What weren't you doing, or what were you doing? So if you were to go back and critique First Pancake Garry, what was he doing right or wrong, or both?
I think part of it was my perhaps a little bit lack of knowledge about what had transpired over like the last 20 years and like the history of some of the games. And so I wasn't knowledgeable enough to actually ask the right questions for the games. So I had some really good guests that's okay. They had the knowledge and they brought it into the interview. But as I learned more about the history of the games, and I know you had Shannon Appelkline on your show, and he's a friend of my show. Like, he was one of my early interviews because that's how I caught up on what I lost out on.
Good way to catch up. Yeah.
And so Shannon's been each end of year, like 3 years in a row now, he's been my end of year guest where we do a year in review. And you develop those relationships, and I just kept learning, and there's some kind of early wins as far as designers that were also maybe just getting their feet underneath them. Mm-hmm. And now they're what I consider really established designers, and we've kind of grown together.
Like who?
Gabriel Quiroga.
Nice.
He did Hell Knight and Warpland, and he's from Argentina. And so he was one of my kind of earlier guests where I was like, I just love talking to him, love his game design, and now I've had him on a couple times, and I think he's really cutting edge of what I like, at least in kind of indie games, and I have to say, my focus has always been those oddball indie game designers, but I also mixed it with established designers that could impart their wisdom. So it's kind of those two pillars of my podcast was established people that could pass along lessons, and the new designers that were sharing their creations, and kind of mixing that together.
I think it's good to mix that together, because I think the picture starts to form between all of that. So I could not agree with you more on that. Looking through the time, all of the interviews you've done, are there some standout moments where you had your mind blown, where something, an answer just kind of knocked you off the chair? Is there some like big moments that you can think of?
Well, I don't know if it was the answer per se, but I had an interview with Lee Gold, and I don't know if you're familiar with Lee. She's been back, she goes back to the Garry Gygax days. And she has continued this alarms and excursions, and it's called an APA. It's like a zine, essentially. Although every time I mentioned it, calling it a zine, she was like, "No, it's an APA." So it's kind of.
And I don't know what APA is.
Well, you and me both. It's like an amateur press association.
Oh, okay.
Type of thing. Okay. But if you can imagine, this zine that is constantly ebbing and flowing over the years, that it's almost like a play-by-post zine, where somebody puts an article in, and then you get the letters to the editor about the article, and it's just a continuous feedback loop.
Interesting.
And conversation, but in print form.
Yeah.
And so she goes back to this day, and I ran across her stuff in some Reddit post or whatever, and I reached out to her out of the blue, and I don't think anybody's interviewed her for years and years and years, and I tracked her down and had an interview with her, and her and her husband Barry, and the whole time it was comical, but it was so authentic that she'd be going, "Barry, get me this, Barry, get me that," and it was just such a fun conversation where she was talking about the history and talking about phone calls with Garry Gygax.
Yeah.
And Garry Gygax thought she was a man. And so he got on the phone with her, and he was like, "Well, you're a girl." And she's all, "Yeah." And so
go ahead.
She recounted that story for me as we're talking. So it was just a nice to showcase her work. I guess, her lifelong work. And for those that might not know about her, it was kind of nice to be able to take that and put it out there more in the public. And I had a lot of people reach out to me going, "Oh, that was just amazing."
That's cool. That is so cool. Yeah. The list of people that are on my target list is so long. I'll never, if I put out an episode a week, 2 episodes a week, I'd never get through it. I'd never get through it's just unbelievable. The number of super interesting people that are out there. When you look at your channel and what you're doing there, you hinted at it with the views and stuff like that. I'm always curious for content creators. How do you motivate yourself and measure success, right? So this is not putting food on your table. The number of content creators that actually, do enough to make enough is very, very small. So what keeps you doing this? What keeps you opening, putting new episodes out, going through the time and effort to book guests? Like, why? It's not money. So what is it?
And maybe this is like one of those other like Lee Gold interviews. I have a pretty sleepy Discord that I set up. It's sleepy. I don't like, I'm not huge on social media. It's pretty sleepy Discord. But one of my Discord members is Jason Oberman, and he wrote a game called 3086, and he made the game when he was in the military when he was young. So this game was 38 years old. And him over the years, he'd been playing this game that he made over, 38 years. And he shared it with me on Discord. And my first initial reaction was like, okay, I'm going to put my, minimalist modern TTPRG hat on, and I'm going to tell him how he can fix it. And so a couple pages, I was like, well, I'd fix this, I'd fix that. And then all of a sudden the charm of the game started to come over me, and I was like, I got to the end of it and I said, I wouldn't change anything. Like everything just kind of makes sense. And
yeah,
I asked him to come on the show and I interviewed him, and I expected, like maybe 100, maybe 150 people might watch it. And then all of a sudden I looked and I had like all of a sudden like 50 more followers, and I looked at his views on the video, and it was like 2,000 people had viewed it. And I was like, something resonated with people.
Isn't that something? That
they were in the same boat. And he got emotional during his interview as well.
Yeah.
It was his life's work. And that, made me go, I was so happy to share that with him.
Yeah.
And the world. And, as people reach out to me and they go, hey, I'd like to be on the show, I keep going, maybe my show will be the thing that makes them successful.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know. You never know. So guys, the Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and the methods for crafting their creations. We've been talking about a lot of stuff, and none of it is about the game that we have made. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and we're going to find out what the hell Bugbusters is. We'll be right back.
Robin is a notorious art thief. Fox is a well-respected special agent. Will Fox catch Robin? Will Robin get away? And before the end, will they kiss? Kiss Me If You Can is a two-player rom-com romp about art heists and love, coming this July from me, Sam Dunawald, host of the games podcast Dice Exploder. If you want to make your own rom-com in under an hour with someone you enjoy flirting with, go to Kickstarter now and follow Kiss Me If You Can.
So I heard the idea of the game when you sent it over to me. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And you talk about the charm emerging from our 38-year-old game that you talked about. As soon as I saw some of the assets and the vibe of this game, I was like, okay, all right, sign me up. I need to learn about this. So you're a fan of the hobby for a long time. You've got this desire to make games. I would be hard pressed to believe that Bugbusters was the first idea.
No.
Is that accurate?
That's correct. That's right.
So, but that's the one we're talking about today. So my first question is, how did this one survive? So of all of the ideas that you've had, somehow this one finally just rose up to the top and actually became a game that you are spending time, building and promoting and putting the love and soul into it. Let's start there. Why did this game emerge?
Well, I started with the problem that many designers have is where I was like, the system. Like, you're thinking about a game and then you go the system. And then there's all these like open source, not open source, but like OGL type systems. And so I actually made my own system. I'm like, oh, this is going to be the next Blades in the Dark system, right? Obviously not. But I made it, and I tried to make it in my head. I was like, I got to make this as simple as possible. I had IKEA characters like knights, dragons, but they looked like IKEA characters. And to me, I thought it was clever, and it was okay. But, you kind of go, okay, that's not good.
Right.
I learned from it. And the other thing I kind of learned was, in today's world where you're competing with so much media, it's not necessarily that you're competing against other games. You're just competing for attention.
Period.
Attention. Yeah. And so your game is not a needle in the haystack. Your game is a needle in a needle stack.
Right.
Like, there's just so much out there. And so it kind of made me go, like, you really have to have a solid premise to bring a game to life. And I had a couple other false starts of, like, I was playing around with a diesel punk kind of idea game. And actually prior to Bugbusters, which I still think it's a great premise and I want to explore it, is like a wrestling game. Because I don't think that's been maybe done the way I would do it.
Yeah.
But I had an artist lined up and it just never fulfilled that. The game's there. So that might be after Bugbusters. But I had a whole list of like maybe 20 games or 20 game ideas. And this was going to be just a little zine where I was going to say, exterminators fighting in a secret alien invasion. And that's it. And then I started thinking about it.
So stop for a second, though. But where did that come from? Right? So that's not something you picked up off the sidewalk. Where does that idea of exterminators and aliens combining? And
well, I guess it actually almost come off the sidewalk.
Okay.
There's inspiration as far as I love the old Ghostbusters D6 game. So that was Sandy Peterson is like a master in game design. So I always that was one of my favorite games. I loved Car Wars. And I don't know if you played Car Wars. It's Steven Jackson game.
Yes.
And do you remember those like little books of Uncle Albert's?
I do.
With the weird weapons in it.
Yeah.
So I liked that. And so, like, all these things kind of came to fruition where I was like, what if, like, instead of Ghostbusters, they were exterminators and they were fighting aliens. I remember playing Traveler, and for the most part, whenever we played Traveler, it was like aliens, like the plural aliens game where you're just fighting aliens.
Yeah.
And you kind of combine all these different elements. It just seemed like something kind of fun to play.
So, somewhat derivative premise then, right? As all premise are. When does it become yours, right? So when did this idea, this premise of the game, not even getting into the mechanics of it, but the setting and the themes, when did you feel like it wasn't a reskin Ghostbusters or another alien bug hunt? When did it become something on its own?
And then this might be where I get inspired by that tree planting, where like I'm like, okay, a whole bunch of like really working class oddball characters. And then in Calgary, I'm probably going to get sued about this, but there's a guy named Pete the Plumber that he does commercials, and they're really cheesy. It's like, they're really bad, but people love him in Calgary, Pete the Plumber.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, what if there's a character that started this Bugbusters company called Doug, and he busts bugs? And so, I found an artist in Gareth Little in the UK, and I liked his style, and he hadn't really done much. Like, I mean, his Instagram was minimal, but there was one or two pictures, and I said, hey, would you be interested in doing a yellow page ad for Doug and Bugbusters? And so I said, I showed him some ideas I had, and he came up with this yellow page ad that it was like, I'm Doug, I bust bugs. And like early internet days of, you include the www.bugbusters.ltd. And that single document started to formulate the idea of like, okay, it's like in the 90s, there's like this exterminators. We have no idea the real purpose of the exterminators, but they're out there fighting a good fight, but they're not getting any credit for it. They're just working class heroes.
So now let's talk about the mechanics. So this is a system that you have come up with. Hey, pitch Garry. Pitch the system to me. So talk to me. What is unique about the mechanics of this game?
Well, I wish it was as unique as like you led people to believe, but it's derivative of everything. As far as like, I really liked the D6 system. Every time like I think about a game, I'm like, well, the D6 system did it well. Like every dice pool system that's come after is derivative of Sandy Peterson's
no question
D6 game.
Yep.
And the only thing I never really liked about it was the pips. And so if you had 6 dice and you'd roll them, you'd have to count all the pips. And I went, there's got to be a faster way to determine success. So I kind of took that to a scale of just 12 and using the top 2 dice and using the bell curve. And so by doing that, all you have to do is look for the top 2 dice scores. And then it also opens up the ability to roll more than 2 dice. You can roll 4 and 5, but still take the top 2. And then, you know, from there, as almost every game system that kind of comes, you start to go, well, how do I twist it, manipulate it in order to achieve what I need it to do? And then it kind of becomes its own thing.
So, question for you, Garry. If let's say that I took your book to somebody who designs games but has never seen it before, and I say, you know, I want you to focus on the mechanics of this game and look through it, and they do that, and then if I were to ask them, whose fingerprints do you see here? Now, it sounds like they would say, I see Sandy Peterson, right? I see Ghostbusters. Are there other fingerprints mechanically that have snuck into your game?
Yeah, well, I have a thing called Doom Stack, which is basically an abstraction of the damage or trauma that you're taking. And so you could probably link it to the game of Dread. And I think you've had, is it Epidia?
Epidia,
on the show. And so you could probably link it to like that real tactile at the table kind of thing. It doesn't have to be. It's a little bit gimmicky, admittedly. But when you take trauma, you put a black die down. And as you take more trauma, you put it on. And when it finally tips over, you're out. And so it can be done on your paper. Like if you're unable to stack, and that's fine, you can do it on paper. But so the damage is reflective of that. And I also try to design it to, I mean, Sandy Peterson's D6 is like so instrumental. I can't even begin to tell you. But there's other games that have like bennies, like Savage Worlds, and like you take the best ideas from different places and you try to make it fit the game. And how important it is. I remember like going back to when I started and I said, I'm going to make a system without the game attached. Was kind of silly. Like,
why?
I think games deserve the system that's right for them. And I think a lot of early game designers, I'm not saying it's not possible to use a generic system, but I think more and more I'm of the mind of make the system purpose built for that game. Because that's the most important thing is the fun at the table and trying to shoehorn things in. I mean, I appreciate generic systems, but I think having a custom built system for the game is probably the way to go.
And it's a preference thing, right, Garry? Like, I have nothing against generic systems. I enjoy Savage Worlds. But I personally am enjoying these bespoke systems that are built to do a certain thing, to support a certain style of play. And, you know, part of it is that I have the ability to learn games quicker than a lot of people. So it's easy for me to jump from system to system. I'm a master of none of them, but I'm the same way. And you know, I've had this conversation many times with people about it. And I'm nothing against generic systems. Like, boo, do you like what's working for you is working for you. But for me personally, I'm in your camp, Garry, where like, I really enjoy, this is the type of story that this is being built for. Now let's mechanically support it. It makes a huge difference. So now let's put that back to you then. So what is the story we're trying to tell with Bugbusters?
Well,
or what play are we supporting, I should say?
Yeah, well, Rules Light by nature is so that you can concentrate on the narrative aspect of the game. And also, I cannot disavow myself from the OSR style of gameplay, which.
What does that mean to you when you say that? What is the OSR style of gameplay? When you say that, what do you mean?
I think there's like lots of definitions of that, but to me, it's the player skill is brought to the table.
Got it.
Rather than the character sheet. Like the common term is like, don't look for answers on your character sheet. Like the player brings those to the table. So for me, like there's no intelligence, there's no wisdom or perception checks. Like it's up to the character or the player to make their character do these types of things. So for me, it's an approach that I think a lot of OSR types of players enjoy, which is the player themselves is part of the game, and they're bringing their presence to the game. And you know, you don't have, just because your intelligence is low, you don't have to play dumb. I mean, you can do that also, like kind of just narratively type of thing. But for me, that's the important part, is to player agency also is a piece of that, where there's not this predefined like arc that you're going to hit, that you're there to do it a little bit on the fly. Like you set up scenarios versus railroading them to like, well, you're going to do this, and then you're going to meet the big bad. It's like you make a location and then let the players get up to shenanigans, because players enjoy shenanigans. And I think with Bugbusters, like it might sound like it's like a comic game, like, you know, like Toon or Paranoia. There for sure is the element, but I kind of see it as like, I'm setting you up to have shenanigans. I'm not trying to be funny in the game. I'm setting you up to enjoy the shenanigans. Almost like I saw an article about zookeepers, and they have enrichment where they put like, you know, a soccer ball in the elephant enclave or whatever, and that's kind of it. Like you set them up with the enrichment of the space, and you go have fun. Let's see what happens.
So I've got a clear sense, Garry, of this OSR feeling that you're talking about as a genre of gaming or style of gaming, and for Bugbusters. What's the mirror image of that? Right? So we've described this whole thing, and this is the camp that you're in. If I were to say, okay, now I want to go find the exact opposite of that, do you have a sense of, are there games out there that, and it's not, it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means it's not you, right? Like that you see as a direct reflection.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I actually just had Jason Cordova on my show, and my channel primarily is kind of OSR indie games. And I mean, obviously Brindlewood Bay is an indie game for sure.
Yeah, but Jason knows OSR though. But yeah.
And so I think, and what I said to him, and I fully agree with what I say, is that I love story games too. And there's like pieces of that I just love to pull into the OSR, and vice versa. There's things of the OSR that gets pulled into story games, and that line is kind of being blurred. And there's certainly elements of story game in Bugbusters. I wouldn't say a ton, but there are elements of it. And so I see those lines blurry, and I kind of use the description of, it's like a horseshoe, if you can imagine it like this.
Yeah,
we're almost at the same point, story games and OSR, so close.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they want to battle.
So this is what's interesting to me about Jason, and I want to talk about this a little bit more. So Jason's Fear of a Black Dragon podcast, phenomenal podcast. It's all about old D&D modules.
Yeah.
Right, which is as far away from the indie, story game you can get. And so we look at Brindlewood Bay Public Access as other games, right? And we say, okay, those are story games. What does that mean to you when you say that, though? Right. So if we're looking at that horseshoe and there's a gap there, what's the gap? What's the difference between the OSR and the story game in your mind? What makes Brindlewood Bay a story game?
Well, I would say probably the difference that most people would claim, and I'm not even sure if it's right, but most people would claim, is that on the story game, you're going to end up at a certain point. Like that it almost codifies that genre that you're playing in will be achieved, and whatever that genre is. And the way the system is set up is that you will have a conclusion to that story based upon the genre that you might see in a TV show or a movie.
Got it. Yep.
Whereas in the OSR, I think there's a lot more freewheeling, and you have no idea where that story is going to go. And I think there's a reliance upon random tables and random dice rolls to codify it in a random way.
So why does one have more gravity for you than the other? So why do you find yourself moving more towards that than, say, the more prescriptive beginning, middle, end?
Well, I think that's the dilemma that I get caught in, where I like OSR principles, but I do like a story that has a little bit of conclusion, because sometimes when it's just too random, that kind of also loses it. So I see the need to, like I said, Bugbusters has PBTA elements in it, even though I don't. Well, even like initiative, like in OSR, like in like real like Dungeons and Dragons, there's like your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. Where in Bugbusters, it's a little bit like what I call it's like tipping the hand. And I've always wondered about this with initiative, is like when you win initiative, sometimes you want to know what the other person's doing so that you can make your choice.
Right.
And so like that's like one example of the NPC or the bad guy or whatever tips their hand as to they're going to do this. What is your response?
Interesting.
And so in essence, you always get the last say to do something, but the NPC is going to do something unless you intervene.
Oh, that's cool. I've been oddly fascinated by initiative lately. And I think it's because I've been playing a combination of games recently, Gary, that handle it all very different ways. From roll, where roll for it just like traditional trad initiative, to something like a gumshoe system, which is stat based initiative, right? Whoever has the highest of this goes first, to like a popcorn style, the one that always comes to my mind is FFG Star Wars, right? Which is the bad guys have their initiatives, the good guys have their initiatives, but we can swap them all around. And then I've been playing Shiver lately, horror RPG from Parable Games. And theirs is really interesting because it's this weird hybrid that you've got first, middle, last. And there's one thing, NPC or PC, that it gets first, one that gets last, and then just the middle. But the director, like in a lot of games, decides the initiative as they go. I don't know what I like. And I would imagine that you struggled, like you played around with some different ideas for initiative. How did you sort through that? How did you decide how you wanted that to be handled in a combat scenario in Bugbusters?
Have you ever heard of FKR or Free Kriegspiel Revolution?
No.
So FKR, like we don't need enough acronyms already, right?
Is it BFG?
But FKR it's based upon like a German wargaming scenario, like during the Prussian military used this like to train their troops.
Okay.
And basically what happens is there's a judge that basically was the world, an experienced judge that like, if you do this, this is going to happen. Like if it's muddy, this is going to happen. And so the judge becomes a fair arbiter of the world. And that's kind of, I guess, like if FKR sits anywhere, it's kind of between story games and OSR. And I find it like really fascinating. People have brought this kind of concept back where very minimal rules. You have like a mechanic that actually just allows you to determine if you're successful. But for the most part, the judge or the GM is the world. Like, it's like the whole thing. And there's examples, all sorts of examples. Like if a bad guy has a knife up to the hero's neck and they go, well, I've got 60 hit points. I'll be able to survive a knife wound. And the GM goes, no, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Like that's just the way it is.
You're not a bag of hit points. Yep.
Yeah. And so FKR kind of allows you to like play the world as you see it. And if you can agree on the fiction of the world, then a communal trust in the group, if you can agree on that, it just creates this environment of like the GM is being the world and you are working your way through that world. And I probably forgot your question, but
I was talking about how you decided or how you settled on initiative with Bugbusters, right? So you have this idea where the GM is a fair arbitrator, right? It's not he's not an opponent, she's not an ally, she is the world, and she's reacting to that. And that's one way to handle initiative, which kind of hints to what I was talking about. Where does Bugbusters end up, and how did you get there?
Well, I got there because I wanted the I guess element of like speed in an essence. Like you can really hop around, like the old adage of like don't split the party.
Yeah.
Like when I play Bugbusters, like parties get split all the time, and I like literally can just like go, okay, what do you do? Okay, now it's like scene shift here, scene shift there, and in essence, like I always compare it to Return of the Jedi when they have the fight on Endor, the fight in the throne room, and then the fight out in the spaceships, and you're just cutting, and you pick the right moment to cut and just like leave it a little bit on a cliffhanger. I think that's the way I like to approach it. So, and it goes back to like way back to when we first started playing games and we didn't understand the rules. I think that's almost the way we played anyways. No question. Yeah. So anyways, I felt that kind of fit the game of Bugbusters, and that's one of the few kind of like gray areas. And I know a lot of people are like, when do I roll initiative? And I'm like, you don't. This bug is coming at you. What do you do?
And if it slices your throat with a knife, you're dead. Yeah. So, as you were going through the iterative process, do you have a sense of when you knew this was the game? Like this may not be my last game, but this is going to be my first game. This is going to be the game I'm going to push through this process. Do you have a sense of when that happened, when you knew that something was clicking?
Yeah, I think like as the world started to develop, and I fell in love with the world, like as I was developing it.
Why? What did you fall in love with?
It was just like everything from like the design aesthetics, like for those that might have seen it, its design ethos is like it's punk rock layout, but it's got like a employee handbook content.
And a weird retro vibe too. Like there's a retro feel to it as well. Yeah.
And then some of the weapons, I think I got like my shirt here of the Insectosonic. And I started to come up with these crazy ideas for like, well, if you're going to battle bugs, you got to have all these like crazy weapons. And then like the next level was like, well, these weapons, they just don't shoot damage. You can like, the Insectosonic, you can turn the volume up. You can do like a cone of silence, and the weapons started to take on a life of their own. And then like the different bugs and the different attacks and even saving throws. Like people are so down on like people really like to like condense things. Like Chris McDowell of Into the Odd. Mm-hmm. The mantra of that is simplify the rules down to their like absolute minimum. Yep. And that's amazing. But for me, I was like, I kind of like the idea of saving throws during the like old school, where it's like wand and paralysis and that kind of thing. And so I came up with saving throws for like acid and web, and like it doesn't need to be there. But those saving throws for like bug attacks just kind of adds flavor. Sure. And so I was like, I could minimize this, and in essence, you easily could. But I like the flavor and the vibe.
There's something about that feel, Gary, where it's just like you're going to get hit by the web, but you get one more roll to stop it. right? And even Mothership couldn't let go of it, and there's a reason why, and it's because there's that exciting last like one more roll, right? And it you're seeing a lot of games that have no defense rolls, right? Like they roll to attack, and if they succeed, and maybe your target number is your closest defense. You can affect the target number. There's something cool about somebody rolls to hit you, and you get to roll to try to save your ass. That's got a feel to it.
Yeah. It's it almost came to me over time and iteration, and play testing was important. There's like a few false starts. Like I remember we were playing one game and like it didn't work, and I stopped it. Well, there's like, and it turned into like a range weapon thing of like somebody had a gun, but it was too like, silly things that you go, well, it has to be this way. They can't shoot their gun that close. They have to back up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And but it never made sense for them to keep backing up because the bug would just get closer and you go,
right.
This just doesn't make sense. So I stopped the game and like, I talked through it with the players going like, why did you do this? And what could we, and you work through those kind of bugs literally bugs.
Yeah.
And you kind of learn what works and what doesn't. And like listen to the players and like what they're experiencing. And part of my education since I went back to school is user experience. Mm-hmm. And so like I really value that iterative process of test, change, but you also have to know the right questions to ask the players in order to get the results of like, you got to know what you were trying to achieve, why it missed, could it be fixed, how do you go back to the drawing board? So there's like a lot of different things. And even I remember one time a guy was being attacked and he said, and it was in a restaurant and in the cold room, and he looked for salt and he was like, well, I'm going to pour it on the slug. And I said, well, you've got a gun. Why are you looking for salt? So I put a resource specialty to go, when you see movies and you're like, they grab the pen and they stab the monster in the hand with the pen, and all of a sudden the monster lets them go. So there's like this mechanic for under your cool attribute that, hey, like maybe I'll reach for salt and maybe that'll save my ass.
That's cool. So I want to, and this is going to help me with your process a little bit. You stop the game. Range is a problem. You keep you talk to the player. How did you solve for that? Right. So you identified a problem. This is not fun. This is not working the way I wanted to do. Can we use that very specific example of what that conversation was like and how you ended up solving it?
Well, we talked like we got really off on a tangent because all the people I play with are like almost game designers themselves. Mm-hmm. So like it was good to have like that kind of knowledge at the table. And so like I went away for that, like a little bit defeated for like 3 or 4 days, where I was like trying to go like, well, what could I do? How could I change that? And then I realized I was almost being too prescriptive of detail for like a rules like game, like, and that just opened up the door of being that arbiter of the world. Like sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
And the benefit of rules light is you don't have to codify everything. You have to allow you have to provide the GM the process for how to resolve these things. And so when you start codifying everything and start getting into ranges and that kind of thing, you can go down a rabbit hole you don't want to go down.
So Gary, if the type of style of GMing that we're talking about from a system perspective is something that there's a lot of experienced GMs that know how to do it, right? They just understand this. They understand this rule isn't written out, so we're going to figure this out and we're going to move forward. And we're going to keep the pace going. How do you solve that for somebody new? So how do we make Bugbusters a game for first-time GMs? How do you help with that?
And this goes to maybe one of the areas that I would love to see game designers concentrate on more is GM support.
Yeah.
Like if you're making a game, like maybe 20-30% of it should be the players and 70% should be GM support, and try to help see these different scenarios or edge cases that they can learn from and guide them, and just provide the GM tools that will assist them to run the game. And I wouldn't say like the way it should, because once it's out there in the world,
it's not yours anymore. Yeah.
But I think that's what I'm trying to do, is provide GMs with as much resources and support so that they can play the game. I feel confident about it.
So one of the things that I'm always fascinated by, Garry, is I keep hearing towards the end of the process, as the game is reaching its maturity level, I keep hearing designers tell me, then I added this and it all came together, or then I took this away and it all made sense. Did that happen with this game?
I would say, and it's like a kind of a weird thing, is I made an online dice roller.
Okay.
That, like, as we were playing, and somebody said, "Oh, I want to do an actual play of the game," and I went, "But part of the fun is seeing everybody's dice and seeing those top 2 dice,
right?"
And part of it too is if you want to take on extra stress or trauma, you can take black dice and add to your white dice, and you get extra dice on your roll, but those black dice immediately go on your doom stack.
Oh, that's so cool.
But actually making the online dice roller allowed me to kind of like really showcase that in a way that I wasn't maybe able to do without actually visibly seeing it. And so for me, I was like, wow, like this is kind of cool that I could make this. And so I brushed off my old HTML coding and made an online dice roller. But you had been,
hold on a second though, Garry, but you've been rolling dice in person with this for how long? So what was different about the online roller that had such an impact?
It just kind of, it made me like, it's like anything that when I do a documentary or do an interview and I'm like looking at the way somebody like might say, in an interview, and it forces you to go, okay, I'm going to cut that out in the interview. And like, I'm going to cut to a different camera angle. And it like, you go so deep into perfecting it and that you go, oh, it's way better. Like nobody will ever hear in the documentary somebody go, because I've edited them all out. And it's the same with the dice roller, where I was like so deep into how to make that dice roller perfect that I went, this is the way the mechanics also should work.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was kind of a maybe happy accident that somebody wanted to do an actual play of it.
That's very, very cool. So guys, we're going to take one more break. When we get back from this break, we're going to do one of my favorite segments. We're going to find out what Garry's been grooving on. We'll be right back. Are you enjoying our long-form interviews with creatives on this podcast? Maybe you're craving deeper discussions about our guests or some of the RPG plays on our Twitch and YouTube channel. Well, I've got an opportunity for you. You see, Third Floor Wars now has a Patreon-only Discord server. You can join a vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts diving deep into every episode of our RPG plays and podcast. Connect with fans, engage in spirited discussions, and unlock the behind-the-scenes insights. For just $1 a month, access a world of tabletop gaming goodness. Connect with passionate gamers who share your love for the Tabletop Podcast and everything produced on the third floor. As a Patreon supporter, you also enjoy ad-free episodes of this podcast. You can immerse yourselves in captivating stories and fascinating interviews without interruptions, taking your listening experience to a whole new level. By joining the Third Floor Wars Patreon community, you not only gain exclusive access to the Patreon-only Discord server, but you also support the growth of my podcast and channels. Your contributions enable me to continue creating high-quality content that entertains, educates, and upskills tabletop enthusiasts like yourself. Maybe don't wait. Join the Third Floor Wars Patreon today and unlock a world of camaraderie, discussions, and knowledge. Visit patreon.com/Third Floor Wars or check the link in the show notes and come join our community. The Third Floor Wars Patreon-only Discord server awaits you. I and the other patrons can't wait to welcome you with open arms and a fistful of dice. We've spent about an hour and a half talking about all this shit you're making. Now I want to talk about everything you're eating. So lately, has there been a movie, a book, an RPG, or something that just got its hooks into you? You know what that feeling is, right? Where you come across something and you put it down or you stop watching it and you're like, I'm going to go back and check this out again. I'm going to look at it, and it just occupies your mind. What's the most recent few things that have done that for you?
Well, first of all, I'm going to shout out that Calgary is a hotbed of filmmaking.
Really?
Because like The Last of Us was filmed here. Fargo is filmed here.
I did not know that. Oh, God.
The Predator series Prey was filmed here. So,
oh, my God, that movie was so good.
So I'll throw that out as far as like...
Those are three big deals.
Yeah. And
I hear the new Fargo is phenomenal with Jodie Foster. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, that's the True Detective.
Oh, True Detective. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, what was the latest Fargo that
John Hamm?
Yes, the John Hamm I heard was phenomenal.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do a shout out to Calgary there. But my watch stuff, I spend an enormous amount of time on YouTube and listening to podcasts. I delve into those areas, and partly it's like I'm doing my day job, and I listen to a lot of stuff. So Craig, your podcast is right up there. I'll be listening to it anytime you drop a new episode. But one of the areas, and because I do film work, when you look at my channels, I have my Garry Snow creative film stuff, and I've got my Dieku Games YouTube. Yep. And it's interesting to see the different algorithms between
sort through
the tabletop side and then the Garry Snow stuff, which is film stuff and camera reviews and cinematography and all audio recording and stuff like that. But sorry for going in a long rant, but that's kind of what keeps me always on the go. But lately, and it goes back to the idea of designing a wrestling game, is I've been really looking at old school wrestling, like the territory era of wrestling. When I grew up in Calgary here, it was Stampede Wrestling with Bret Hart.
Oh, yeah!
And so growing up as a kid, that was one of the pillars, right? Of you had superheroes, you had Star Wars and wrestling. And I loved that era of territory wrestling before Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
And and for those that might not know, every region had their own kind of territory. And there's this gentleman's agreement of you stay in your territory, I'll stay in mine.
And they all had their personalities and their own stars. It was all these little WEEs or WWE, whatever it was, little tiny things. And it was regional. And then when crossovers happened,
well, you wouldn't even know because you only saw your TV. Yeah. And they would bring in the bad guy from whoever or wherever, and they would come and beat up your good guy and have this feud for a few months. Yep. And then they'd bring a new bad guy in from some other territory, and they would just travel around.
Amazing.
So all these YouTube channels that feature territory wrestling and these really old school matches, and I can't help but the suspension of disbelief. As a kid, watching these, and you go, well, it was real as a kid. But as an adult, you can appreciate it on a whole new level. And there's been a few documentaries. I think The Dark Side of the Ring I've been watching, where they talk about the real kind of travesties and
exploitation.
And bad stuff that had happened in the wrestling era, or the territory era. And then also Tales from the Territories, which actually I think was produced by The Rock.
Interesting.
Because his dad also was in that territory era. So I think for him, it was a bit of a way to connect with his roots a little bit. And even on Netflix, there's one that's called The Wrestlers, where they go in and show this like small indie promotion in current times and how they struggle to put bums in seats, how all these wrestlers are like working for hot dogs and soda pop on the for a show, how they're trying to make it. And I see a lot of analogy of hobbies like tabletop role-playing games where there's no money in tabletop role-playing games, and you do it for a passion.
What is it about pro wrestling that it keeps coming up in my interviews? So like I think I talked to John Wick about this for like an hour and a half. And I'm trying to figure out what that connection is, because it comes up more than once, Garry. Like, where's the mutual gravity here? Help me make this connection, at least for you, right? So why you love role-playing games, you love tabletop role-playing games, you love this type of wrestling. What's the connective tissue there? I think I see it, but I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, wrestling is essentially a LARP.
Interesting.
Like when you think about it.
Yeah.
That like the combatants like know the outcome, but they're also trying to put it on a good show. And so there's a bit of storytelling that takes place in the ring. And when you like the art of storytelling in the ring, I think has been a little bit lost to the new promotions where they're.
Why? How so?
Well, I think it's all athleticism. And believe me, the athleticism that they have, the newer wrestlers, like compared to the old wrestlers, is like so much more. But if you watch the old wrestling, they knew how to pace a story in the ring. And it's very similar to what tabletop role-playing games is. It's like the GM needs to know how to pace the story, when to bring the action, when to like let the crowd kind of settle down a little bit before the next bit of action comes, when to have the comeback. And I don't say that in a railroady way,
right?
But I say that in a improv way of there's just a natural flow to what a role-playing game is. And even the players participate in that. It's not just the GM's responsibility. It's the players also feeding off of, okay, I need to do something, and now's the time.
Have you watched, so everybody's telling me, and I haven't seen it yet, what's the new movie that's just coming out with what's-his-face from The Bear and...
The Iron Claw, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had a chance to see it yet?
I haven't seen it. It came here when I was away out of town for work. But, like, yeah, like that's like the story.
Because that's that whole era, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's, how come I'm skipping the name? But out of Texas, there is the family that...
I can't think of the brothers' names.
I want to say
We're not live. Let's look it up real quick. Iron Claw.
I'll let you do the heavy lifting for me.
The Von Erich family?
The Von Erich family. So the dad was like a wrestler that had this claw that he would apply to people's heads, right? And squeeze their brains. And it's like something out of a Bond villain. And he had sons that basically took up the mantle. And the fans were so, like, these were the heartthrobs of Texas. Like, the fans were so into it. And the girls were so into the Von Erich boys that they were like the Justin Biebers, or I'm too old to kind of know who the heartthrobs are nowadays, but that the Von Erich boys were just like part of the fabric of the community. And same with here in Calgary with the Hart brothers. They were the same way, is that like real people could go and see their real life superheroes fight it out in the ring. But that I think that story ended a bit tragically. There's all sorts of stuff and that's not uncommon in the territory era of wrestling, where there was so much tragedy. And I think it was like a tough lifestyle between, drugs, painkillers, partying, and that kind of thing. But there's something magical about it when you watch those old videos and you see the crowd reaction. They're not seeing their hero on the movie screen. They know they're going to live and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's something when people thought it was real, and that suspension of disbelief, it's like one of a kind of entertainment.
All right, so been watching territorial wrestling on YouTube. What else has gotten its hooks into you?
Well, being in Calgary, it's kind of a Western area, and I grew up in a Western area, and I'm a sucker for like neo-modern or neo-Westerns and there's like Dark Winds has kind of caught my interest lately.
I don't know that one.
It's a series based upon the Navajo police force in the 70s.
Interesting.
And it's pulpy. Like, it's not 100% accurate, but if you can imagine, it's like, True Detective. It's got some supernatural elements, and it's got like real cool 70s cars in it. Like, every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, I want that car. Like, it looks so cool. But it's like just interesting. And, I think neo-Westerns they're kind of in right now because there's so much, I guess, discussion about like our relationship between settlers and Indigenous peoples. And I know, like myself, I have some Indigenous ancestry in my own life, and I've worked for Indigenous organizations for probably 10 plus years myself, and I have like a lot of friends in that area. So it's interesting to watch us wrestle with these changes in like our perceptions and talking them through. And like anything, you learn from the media you consume. And Dark Winds actually has Navajo writers, or
Nice.
Dene writers, I should say, in the writers' room. And so it's I find in my own experience, and I'm white looking, so a white passing person. So but I have so many relationships. It feels right, that one.
So neo-Westerns like Yellowstone would qualify in that. I'm trying to get a sense of, can you help me define that with some examples, that category?
No Country for Old Men.
Right.
Hell or High Water. Wind River is another movie like that, where it's just about the relationships between the progress, survival, and the relationships between like Indigenous people and the settlers, and how it all mixes together and how we move forward.
Have you seen the new Scorsese movie there with what's his nuts?
DiCaprio?
Yes, thank you, DiCaprio. Have you get a chance to see that?
You know what's funny is like I think I might have a tough time watching that one. Like,
I could see that
because I think it's so like brutally bad as far as I don't know. It just, to me, like, I know it's going to be bad. I think I have to prepare myself.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. I have not heard. I mean, I've heard it's great, but I haven't had a chance to watch it. Damn, Gary, there's a lot of really cool things to do on a Tuesday night that does not involve sitting down with me for almost 2 hours and talking about games. So I appreciate you making the time.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love your podcast. I listen to it all the time. And next year, you're going to get that Emmy.
Thank you. We'll see. So everybody knows the routine. Scroll down in the show notes. Everything that we've talked about, from the game to the trailer for the movie to some of the other stuff that we talked about in the Groove It On segment, are all linked down there for you. But most importantly, you made it to the end. This is it. And I appreciate you listening. Take care. Howdy, friends. Craig here. Today's that was awesome, man. Should have a podcast.
Well, I'm trying.
That was really good, man. Really good segment. Thank you.
And I actually ended up, I don't know if you've ever seen, I do a Game Pitch Garry thing.
It rings a bell, but no, talk to me.
Well, when people were coming to me and they'd be like, "Hey, I want to be on the show," but I wasn't. It made me go like, "There's got to be a better way to pitch your game." And so, and also people are always very shy about pitching their game, and they're always like, "I don't want to sell. I don't want to be like." And so I came up with this character, and I put on like a 10-gallon cowboy hat and a cheap like used car salesman jacket. And I recorded a video called Game Pitch Garry, and I do like this outlandish country accent, like a used car salesman.
Yeah.
And I invite people to like come on down and check out Game Pitch Garry's games. And so I have a thing on my website where people can fill out a form now to be on the game pitch, and like they come with a deck, and I think it actually helps them prepare to market their game because they have a deck.
Oh, that was good, Garry. Thank you. That was really cool.
Well, like I said, I really like. I'm not blowing smoke when I say like I just think your podcast is the best. Love listening to it, and it's kind of like interesting that we have a
what
little
works
bit of
for
crossover.
you, just out of curiosity. Like I'm extremely flattered, but I've been interested. Like what clicks for you?
Well, you do it like it's like what I do, but better.
Okay, how so?
Well, I love the fact that you're like, I wish I could steal it, I won't. Where you're like what you're grooving on and like all that kind of stuff.
Dude, steal it.
No,
take it.
I'm gonna come up with some other.
Okay.
But I think it just allows like the personality to kind of showcase a little bit more, and I'm a little bit more game focused in my content, and sometimes like I want to go down the rabbit holes, and and like they're like, well, no, I'm just going to talk about this, and like I gotta like shoehorn them in. But did you ever air that Steve Jackson interview?
No, I never did, and there's a very big reason why, which is the audio quality was horrible. I don't know what happened, but his side of the audio just was garbage. And the Squadcast that we're talking on right now, it records locally, right? And then it uploads the file, right? Which makes for phenomenal audio because I don't have to deal with latency and internet crap. So I don't know what was happening on his side because he sounded fine when he and I were talking. And I got it. So that's the main reason why it'll never come out. I've tried my best to salvage it because, you know, he's a hero of mine. The other piece of it is, and it's possible because I've had this happen a few times, Garry, where I'll finish the interview and I'll go downstairs to my wife and I'm like, I may not ever air this because it didn't click and we didn't connect and it was a shit interview. I'll go back and listen to it. And I'm like, the fuck was I thinking? Like, this is a phenomenal interview, but like, I don't know if it's a vibe thing that sometimes I come off interviews with. Man, when I got off with Steve Jackson, I was just like, he wanted to be in a million other places and none of them was talking to me. And it's very possible that if I could salvage that audio, I would listen to it and go, oh shit, this was actually really, really good. But, the way I remember the interview going, and it wasn't like he was like, I've had people that are pricks, right? And their episode never comes out because I wish I'd never talked to you, right? That wasn't the case with Steve. Like, he was super nice. But he just, I could tell he wasn't enjoying himself. And that's important to me. Like, I want this to be a fun experience for you. And if it's not, then what are we doing? Like, let's not do this, right? It's okay. You know, just say, you know, and I've had guests that are like, Craig, I'm not feeling it. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. Let's reschedule. I don't want to do this unless you're feeling it. And that's what it was for Steve. But it was, you know, at the same time, really incredible, you know, to talk to him. My other big hero that I got a chance to talk to was the writer Knizia. Like, those two guys are just big parts of they're gods for me in this hobby. And Reiner was the exact opposite of Steve. Like, he just loved it, was into it, really appreciated, you know, the conversation and stuff like that. And again, like, I forgot who else. I was talking to somebody about the Steve Jackson interview and I'm like, there's got to be a point where you're like, the last fucking thing I want to talk about is GURPS. Right? I've been talking about fucking GURPS for 40 fucking years, so let's talk about something else. Yeah. You want to ask me how I come up with a new idea for Munchkin? Go fuck yourself. Right? Like, and so that's fair. Yeah. That's fair. But yeah, it makes me sad. Because even I think if it was a bad interview, I think I still would have put it out.
Because I ended up, I interviewed Phil because I thought Steve was out of my league. And I interviewed Phil. And then Phil circled back and said, well, Steve listened to my interview and he said, hey, let's do this interview with you. So I was like, okay. But I knew from your show that he was it didn't work for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
And so I interviewed him and he was a little stiff. It was a little tough to get him to open up, and even at the end, I had comments going, he definitely does like being interviewed. You can kind of see.
So you know what I'm talking about. So I didn't realize that you had a chance to talk to him. So you know what I'm talking about. Like and I think and I've heard that that's just kind of him.
Yeah. Do you have? I was going to ask you earlier when you were talking about your long list. Do you have a white whale? I'm not going to scoop. I promise.
Dude, get them all. White whale. That's a good question. You know what? So I have white whales. I'm lucky now because I think everybody that's makes games is within my reach. I feel very lucky and blessed that I think I could probably get just about anybody to come on if I asked. But there's a thing out there that nobody's doing, and that is this underground role-playing culture in Toronto and in LA. Like all of these actors, these people that are involved in TVs and movies, I keep hearing about there's this whole underground thing happening where a lot of them are playing games because they have a shit ton of downtime, and it's permeated through that. And I want to talk to these people. I want to learn the connective tissue between being a writer or a director or a producer or an actor and playing these games, and how do they inform each other. So I've got one connection in through the D20 guys. So I'm going to get I'll be able to get some of those guys on here soon. But I want to go even beyond that. The guy that plays the Doctor in Star Trek Discovery, he was also in Rent. Can't think of his name off my top of my head, but I love him. He's a huge classic geek, loves playing role-playing games, does it all the time. So that's kind of my white whales right now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I never thought in a million years that people would pay money to go see Critical Role in Wembley Stadium. And I'm thinking about that. And then I go, well, how real, I can't help but wonder. Because on the production side of things, live streaming and documentaries, there's always a bit of you're making it public friendly.
Yep.
And I'm always kind of curious, how much goes into that behind the scenes, and what it takes to actually pull that off. How much do they know? How much do they not know? Because you want to keep it fresh too. So it can't be too scripted. But
there's a lot on the line though at the same time, right? If I have 2 minutes of dead air on one of my APs, nobody gives a shit because 10 people watch it, right? When you're filling Wembley Stadium, better be pretty goddamn entertaining.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, I honestly don't know the answer to that. That's not how I like to play, so I would never gear my APs towards that. But if someone came out and said, Critical Role is scripted, I'd be like, doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. They may not have started that way, but I understand if they're that way now. And really, does it matter?
Oh, people are entertained, and it's like wrestling, right? I mean, they know who's going to win.
It's not so true. Did you want to do a bumper? I think you mentioned in your email that you would. All right.
I have it's funny. That's the one thing I was going to write ahead of time. But do you usually have people just riff it?
Yep. Mic is yours. Do as many takes as you want, then I'll grab one or two of them and use them.
I gotta have another sip. I'm getting dry mouth.
Yeah, take your time.
Oh, well, I hope it makes sense.
It does. I'm amazed, Gary, how I learn about the game by talking around the game. Like, what's so cool is like we didn't do the standard interview, like what's the game about and like who's gonna like this game and stuff like that. By talking about how it's made, like the game emerges out of it, and I feel like you get a perspective you don't get coming at it from a different direction, if that makes any sense. But like the game came out. The game came out by the end of the interview, which is cool.
No, that's good.
All right, I'll bring us back. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over. And you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, I mean, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.